The small workshop smelled of gun oil and metal shavings. Sarah Chen sat at her workbench, her hands moving with practiced precision as she cleaned the barrel of a sniper rifle. The fluorescent lights hummed above her, casting a white glow across the rows of weapons that lined the walls. She had been doing this job for 7 years now, and her fingers knew every curve, every mechanism, every tiny spring that made these machines work. Outside, the military base buzzed with its usual afternoon activity. Soldiers jogged past in formation, their boots hitting the pavement in rhythm. Helicopters landed and took off in the distance. But inside her workshop, Sarah existed in her own quiet world. She liked it that way. No drama, no complications, just her and the weapons that needed her attention. She was 29 years old, though people often thought she looked younger. Her black hair was always tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the same thing every day: a plain gray work shirt, dark pants, and steel-toed boots. She never wore makeup to work. There was no point when you spent your days covered in gun residue and machine grease. Sarah had stumbled into this career almost by accident. After graduating from technical school, she had applied for a job at a civilian gun shop. The owner, an old veteran named Marcus, had seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. He taught her everything about firearms maintenance and repair. When he retired, he recommended her for a position at the military base. The pay was good, the work was steady, and most importantly, people left her alone. Her co-workers were mostly men, and at first, they had been skeptical. A young woman fixing their rifles? But Sarah had proved herself quickly. She could strip and reassemble a weapon faster than anyone else in the armory. She could diagnose problems that stumped the veteran technicians. She treated every weapon that came across her bench with the same careful attention, whether it was a standard-issue pistol or a specialized sniper rifle worth more than a car. The door to her workshop opened, letting in a blast of hot air from outside. Sarah didn't look up. Soldiers came and went all day, dropping off weapons for maintenance or picking up ones she had finished. She heard boots on the concrete floor walking toward her bench. Heavy boots, she noticed. Someone tall. "I need to ask you something," a male voice said. Sarah continued working, using a small brush to clean the trigger assembly. "Leave it on the counter. I'll get to it tomorrow. It's not about a repair." Something in his tone made her pause. She set down her tools and finally looked up. The man standing in front of her bench was tall, probably 6 feet 2 inches, with broad shoulders and the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of training. He wore standard combat fatigues, but she noticed the Special Forces patch on his sleeve. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with sharp cheekbones and intense dark eyes. He looked to be in his mid-30s. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice neutral. The soldier studied her for a moment as if deciding something. Then he pulled up one of the metal stools and sat down across from her. This was unusual. Most soldiers stood, said what they needed to say, and left. No one ever sat down in her workshop. "My name is Captain James Morrison," he said. "I'm with the 75th Ranger Regiment, assigned to a special operations unit." Sarah nodded but didn't speak. She had learned that military people like to establish their credentials before getting to the point. "I've been asking around about the best firearms technician on this base," Morrison continued. "3 different people gave me your name. They said if anyone knows weapons, it's you." "I do my job," Sarah said simply. "I'm sure you do." Morrison leaned forward slightly. "I need to ask you about something specific. Something that might sound crazy." Sarah felt a small flicker of curiosity. In 7 years, she thought she had heard every possible question about guns. "Go ahead." Morrison seemed to choose his words carefully. "I need to know if it's physically possible to make a confirmed kill shot at 3,800 meters. Sarah blinked. She set down the trigger assembly she had been holding. 3,800 meters. That was over 2 miles. It was an absurd distance for a rifle shot. "That's impossible," she said immediately. "Is it, though?" Morrison's eyes were steady on hers. "I'm not asking if it's easy. I'm not asking if it's probable. I'm asking if it's possible. If every condition was perfect, if the shooter was skilled enough, if the weapon was calibrated exactly right, could it be done?" Sarah's mind was already working through the mathematics. She thought about bullet drop, wind drift, the Coriolis effect, air density, temperature. At that distance, a bullet would be in flight for several seconds. The target would have time to move. A slight breeze would push the round dozens of feet off course. "Why are you asking me this?" she said. Morrison hesitated. Because someone claims they made that shot, and I need to know if they're telling the truth or if they're full of it. Who made this claim? I can't tell you that. Not yet. Sarah picked up a cleaning cloth and wiped her hands, thinking. The current world record for a confirmed sniper kill was around 3,500 meters, achieved by a Canadian Special Forces sniper in Iraq. She had read about it in a military journal. The shot had required incredible skill, perfect weather conditions, and a bit of luck. But 3,800 meters. That was 300 meters farther. The longest confirmed kill shot on record is about 3,500 meters, Sarah said. That was done with a Macmillan TAC-50 rifle, firing 50 caliber rounds. The bullet was in the air for over 10 seconds. At 3,800 meters, you're adding another few seconds of flight time. Every fraction of a second increases the variables. Morrison was listening intently. But you're not saying it's impossible. I'm saying the physics become extremely difficult. At that range, you're not just fighting gravity and wind. The Earth's rotation affects the bullet's trajectory. The air pressure at your location matters. The temperature matters. The altitude matters. A 1-degree difference in temperature can change your point of impact by several inches. What about the rifle itself? Morrison asked. Sarah considered. You'd need a 50 caliber rifle minimum, something like a Barrett M82 or a Macmillan TAC-50. The rounds would need to be match-grade ammunition, not standard military issue. Every bullet would need to be nearly identical in weight and shape. And the scope? You'd need the best military-grade optics available, something that can hold zero at extreme distances. And even then, at 3,800 meters, you're not really seeing your target clearly. You're seeing a heat shimmer or a shadow. Morrison nodded slowly. What about the shooter? Sarah met his eyes. The shooter would need to be exceptional, world-class. They would need to understand windage, elevation, and about a dozen other factors that most people don't even know exist. They would need steady hands, perfect breathing control, and the patience to wait for the exact right moment. You sound like you know a lot about long-range shooting, Morrison observed. I know about the weapons. I know about the mechanics. That's my job. Have you ever fired at that distance? Sarah shook her head. I'm a technician, not a sniper. I fix the guns. Other people shoot them. Morrison stood up from the stool. He seemed satisfied with her answers, though she wasn't sure what he had been looking for. Thank you for your time. You've been helpful. Captain Morrison, Sarah said before he could leave. Why does this matter so much? Why do you need to know if this shot was possible? He turned back to look at her. For a moment she saw something in his expression that she couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or worry. Because if someone really made that shot, he said quietly, then we need to find them. Either they're the most skilled marksman alive, or they're lying about something very important. Either way, I need to know the truth. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back one more time. If you think of anything else about this, anything at all, come find me. I'm in Building 7. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone in her workshop with her tools and her thoughts. She looked down at the rifle parts spread across her bench. 3,800 meters. The number kept running through her mind. She had told Morrison the truth. Such a shot was theoretically possible. But theory and reality were very different things. She picked up her tools and went back to work, but her concentration was broken. She kept thinking about that impossible distance, about the person who claimed to have made the shot, and about why a Special Forces captain would come to her for answers. Sarah had spent 7 years avoiding complications, avoiding drama, keeping her head down and doing her job. But something told her that her quiet life was about to get a lot more interesting. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Captain Morrison. That evening, after her shift ended, she went to the base library instead of heading straight home. The library was a small building near the administrative offices, mostly used by soldiers studying for promotion exams or researching military history. Sarah had been there only a handful of times in 7 years. The librarian, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson, looked surprised to see her. Sarah Chen, isn't it? From the armory? Yes, ma'am. I'm looking for information on long-range shooting records. Military journals, maybe some sniper manuals if you have them. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't ask questions. She led Sarah to a section in the back where military publications were kept. These are all unclassified materials, of course. The classified stuff is kept elsewhere, but there's plenty here about marksmanship and shooting techniques. Sarah spent 2 hours reading. She found the article about the Canadian sniper who had made the 3,500-meter shot. She read about the British sniper who had held the previous record at 2,400 meters. She studied ballistics charts and wind reading techniques. The more she read, the more convinced she became that a 3,800-meter shot would require not just skill, but near-perfect conditions and an element of luck that couldn't be controlled. When she finally left the library, the sun was setting. The base was quieter now, with most soldiers either in the mess hall or their barracks. Sarah walked slowly back to her small apartment on the edge of the base, her mind still churning through calculations. She lived alone in a one-bedroom unit that was standard military housing. The furniture was basic but functional. The walls were bare except for a calendar and a single photograph of her parents, who had died in a car accident when she was 23. She had no siblings, no close relatives. Her work was her life, and she had been content with that. Sarah heated up some leftover rice and vegetables for dinner, eating mechanically while staring at her laptop screen. She had opened a ballistics calculator program, inputting numbers: wind speed, bullet weight, muzzle velocity, air temperature, altitude. At 3,800 meters, even a 5-mile-per-hour wind would push a bullet several feet off target. The shooter would need to compensate for that, plus the bullet drop, plus the Coriolis effect. She was so absorbed in her calculations that she almost didn't hear the knock on her door. When it came again, louder this time, she got up and looked through the peephole. Captain Morrison was standing outside. Sarah opened the door, surprised. "Captain? How did you know where I live?" "I asked around," he said. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you." Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. Morrison entered, his eyes quickly scanning her small apartment. He noticed the laptop on the table, the ballistics program still open on the screen. "You've been researching," he observed. "I was curious," Sarah admitted. "Your question this afternoon had got me thinking. I wanted to understand if what you described was even remotely possible." Morrison sat down at her small kitchen table without being invited. There was something different about him now, less formal than he had been in her workshop. He looked tired, like he had been up for many hours. "I need to be honest with you about something," he said. "The reason I came to your workshop today wasn't random. I've been watching you work for the past 3 weeks. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Watching me, why?" "Because we're investigating something and your name came up in connection with it. Not as a suspect," he added quickly, seeing the alarm on her face, "but as someone who might have information without realizing it." "I don't understand." Morrison leaned forward, his voice low and serious. 6 months ago, during a classified operation in a hostile territory, someone made an impossible shot. They took out a high-value target from a distance that shouldn't have been possible. The shot saved American lives. But here's the problem: we don't know who made it. Sarah sat down across from him, her heart beating faster. "How can you not know? Don't you track your own snipers? This shot didn't come from any of our official sniper positions. It came from somewhere else entirely, from a location we hadn't secured. After the operation, we searched the area. We found a rifle, a Barrett M82, but it had been wiped clean. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. Whoever made that shot disappeared like a ghost. And you think the shot was from 3,800 meters? We've done the calculations based on where the rifle was found and where the target was located. 3,800 meters, give or take 50 meters. It's the longest confirmed kill shot ever made, and we have no idea who made it." Sarah's mind was racing. "But why come to me? I fix guns. I don't shoot them at that distance." Morrison pulled a photograph from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. It showed the Barrett rifle that had been found. Sarah picked it up, studying it carefully. Even in the photograph, she could see certain details. The scope was a Schmidt & Bender top of the line. The bipod had been customized. There were small scratches on the receiver that looked like tool marks. "Do you recognize anything about this weapon?" Morrison asked. Sarah looked closer. There was something familiar about those tool marks. She had seen similar scratches before, the kind left by a specific type of armorer's wrench that she used in her workshop, but thousands of technicians use similar tools. "I'm not sure," she said carefully. "Look at the scope mounting. The way it's been fitted." Sarah examined the photograph more closely. The scope had been mounted with extreme precision. The rings were perfectly aligned, and there was a thin strip of what looked like rubber padding between the scope and the mounting surface. This was a technique she used herself to prevent vibration and maintain zero calibration. "Someone who really knew what they were doing worked on this rifle," Sarah said slowly. The mounting is professional grade. Better than professional, actually. We had our own armorers look at it. They said the same thing. They also said the technique used for mounting that scope is similar to the way you mount scopes in your workshop. Sarah set down the photograph, feeling defensive. I'm not the only person who uses that technique. It's standard practice for precision work, you're right. But here's what makes you interesting to us. 3 months before this operation happened, that same Barrett rifle passed through your workshop for maintenance. We have the records, Sarah thought back. She worked on dozens of weapons every week, hundreds every month. I maintain every Barrett on this base. That doesn't mean anything, maybe not. But 2 weeks before the operation, that rifle was signed out of the armory. The signature on the checkout form was illegible. The person who took it never brought it back. Instead, it showed up on a battlefield 3,000 miles away, after being used to make an impossible shot. Sarah stood up, feeling suddenly angry. Are you accusing me of stealing a rifle and somehow ending up in a combat zone? I'm a civilian contractor. I don't have clearance for operations. I don't have training for that kind of mission. I've never even left this base except to go home. Morrison held up his hands. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I am asking if you noticed anything unusual about that rifle when you worked on it. Did anyone show particular interest in it? Did anyone ask you specific questions about long-range accuracy? Sarah forced herself to calm down and think. She walked over to her small kitchen counter and poured herself a glass of water, taking a long drink. Morrison waited patiently. I remember that rifle, Sarah said finally. It came to me because the scope was losing zero. The shooter who had been using it complained that his point of impact was shifting. I checked everything. The scope, the mounting, the barrel bedding. I found a hairline crack in one of the scope rings. I replaced it and recalibrated the entire system. Did you test fire it? No, I don't test fire rifles. I fix them and send them back. The shooters test them on the range. Did anyone else work on it besides you? Sarah thought carefully. No, I worked on it alone over 2 days. When I finished, I logged it back into the system and left it in the secured storage area for pickup. Morrison nodded, making mental notes. What happened after that? Who picked it up? I don't know. Once I finish working on a weapon, it goes back into general storage. Whoever checked it out would have dealt with the main armory desk, not me. And you didn't notice anything else unusual? No one hanging around your workshop more than normal? No one asking detailed questions about ballistics or long-range shooting? Sarah started to shake her head, then paused. There had been someone. A soldier she had never seen before, who had come into her workshop about a week after she finished working on that Barrett. He had asked her technical questions about wind drift calculations and bullet drop at extreme ranges. She had thought it was just professional curiosity at the time. There was someone, she said slowly. I don't know his name. He was young, maybe 25 or 26. Average height, athletic build. He had a tattoo on his left forearm, I remember that. Some kind of compass. Design. Morrison's expression sharpened with interest. What did he ask you? He wanted to know how to calculate wind drift at distances over 3,000 meters. He asked about the Coriolis effect and how much it would impact a shot. He seemed very knowledgeable already, like he was confirming information rather than learning it for the first time. The next morning, Sarah arrived at her workshop early. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the conversation with Captain Morrison over and over. The base was just waking up when she unlocked her door and flipped on the lights. Everything looked the same as always. Her tools neatly organized on the pegboard, weapons waiting for maintenance lined up on the counter, the familiar smell of gun oil and metal. But nothing felt the same anymore. She tried to focus on her work, stripping down a M4 carbine that needed a new firing pin. Her hands moved through the familiar motions, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She kept thinking about that soldier with the compass tattoo, trying to remember more details about his face or his voice. Why had he been so interested in extreme long-range calculations? Had he been the one who made that shot? Around 10 o'clock, Captain Morrison arrived with another man Sarah didn't recognize. The second man was older, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair cut military short and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He wore civilian clothes, khaki pants and a button-down shirt. Sarah Chen, this is Agent David Foster, Morrison said. He's with Army CID, Criminal Investigation Division. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Am I under investigation? Foster gave her a slight smile. No, Miss Chen. We're hoping you can help us with ours. Captain Morrison tells me you may have spoken with a person of interest in our case. The soldier with the tattoo. Exactly. I've brought a sketch artist. We'd like you to describe him in as much detail as possible. For the next 2 hours, Sarah sat in her workshop with a young corporal who was surprisingly talented at drawing. She described the soldier's face, his angular jawline, his slightly crooked nose that looked like it had been broken at least once, his brown eyes that were set a bit too close together. The corporal's pencil moved across the paper, erasing and redrawing until Sarah finally nodded. That's him. That's as close as I can remember. Foster took the sketch and studied it carefully. You're sure about the tattoo? A compass design on his left forearm? Yes, it was detailed professional work, not like the rough tattoos some soldiers get overseas. This looked like it had been done by a real artist. Morrison and Foster exchanged a look that Sarah couldn't quite interpret. Foster pulled out his phone and took a picture of the sketch, then immediately started typing a message. We're going to run this through our databases, Foster said. See if we can match it with anyone who had access to that rifle or information about the operation. In the meantime, Ms. Chen, I need you to think carefully about the conversation you had with this individual. Did he say anything that seemed odd or out of place? Anything that might indicate what his plans were? Sarah closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember. The soldier had been polite, professional. He had thanked her for the information about wind calculations. He had mentioned something about wanting to be prepared for any situation. And there had been one other thing, something she had almost forgotten. He asked me about cold bore shots, Sarah said suddenly. He wanted to know how much the first shot from a cold barrel would differ from subsequent shots. That's a pretty specific question. Most people don't worry about that level of detail. Morrison leaned forward. A cold bore shot. That's important. In a combat situation, a sniper might not have time to fire warming shots. They'd have to trust that first shot from a cold barrel, which means he was planning for a scenario where he'd only get one chance, Foster added. One shot, one kill from a weapon that hadn't been fired recently. The implications hung in the air. Sarah felt a chill run through her. She had helped this person, given him information that might have been used in whatever he did. The thought made her uncomfortable. I was just answering technical questions, she said defensively. People ask me stuff like that all the time. I had no idea he was planning anything. We know that, Morrison said gently. You're not responsible for what he did with the information, but you might have helped us identify him, which is huge. Foster's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then showed the screen to Morrison. Sarah couldn't see what was on it, but Morrison's expression darkened. We need to take this conversation somewhere more private, Foster said. Miss Chen, would you mind coming with us to a secure briefing room? 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in a windowless room in the base's intelligence building. She had never been in this part of the base before. The room had a large table, several chairs and walls that looked thick enough to block any electronic signals. Morrison closed the door behind them with a heavy thunk. Foster opened a laptop and turned it to face Sarah. On the screen was a military personnel file with a photograph. Sarah felt her breath catch. It was him. The soldier with the compass tattoo, though his hair was shorter in the photo and he was in full dress uniform. Sergeant First Class Ryan Kowalski, Foster said. Age 28, member of the 75th Ranger Regiment. Highly decorated sniper with 3 combat deployments. He went missing 7 months ago, approximately 2 weeks before that operation where the impossible shot was made. Missing? Sarah looked between Morrison and Foster. You mean he deserted? We're not sure what happened, Morrison said. Kowalski was one of the best snipers in the military. He held several marksmanship records. He was scheduled to deploy with his unit, but he never showed up for the transport. His barracks room was empty. His personal belongings were gone. We've been searching for him ever since. Sarah studied the photograph more carefully. In the picture, Kowalski looked confident and capable, with the bearing of someone who knew exactly who he was and what he could do. But there was something else in his eyes, something Sarah couldn't quite name. A distance, maybe, like he was looking at something far away. Why would someone like him disappear? She asked. Foster pulled up another file. That's what we've been trying to figure out. Kowalski came from a military family. His father was Army, his grandfather was Army. He had a clean record, no disciplinary issues, no financial problems. Nothing that would indicate he was planning to go AWOL. Except, Morrison added, 3 months before he disappeared, something happened. Kowalski's unit was involved in an operation that went wrong. They were providing overwatch for a convoy when they were ambushed. The convoy was hit hard. Several soldiers were killed, including Kowalski's spotter, a kid named Danny Martinez. His spotter? Sarah asked. In sniper teams, there's always 2 people, Morrison explained. The shooter and the spotter. The spotter does calculations, watches for wind changes, helps the shooter make adjustments. Martinez and Kowalski had worked together for 2 years. They were close friends. After Martinez died, people noticed Kowalski changed. He became quieter, more withdrawn. He spent hours on the range, practicing longer and longer shots. Foster brought up another file, this one showing after-action reports. Here's what's interesting. The ambush that killed Martinez happened because of bad intelligence. Someone provided faulty information about the route being clear. The convoy walked right into a kill zone. It was a disaster. 8 soldiers died that day. And you think Kowalski blamed someone for it? Sarah asked. We think he wanted answers. And when he didn't get them through official channels, he decided to find them himself. Morrison pulled out a folder and opened it on the table. Inside were surveillance photos from various locations, airports, border crossings, foreign cities. After Kowalski disappeared, we started tracking unusual activity. Someone with military training was moving through various countries, always staying ahead of our intelligence. 3 times we almost caught him, but he vanished before we could get there. And then came the operation 6 months ago, Foster continued. A high-value target was located in a hostile territory. This target was known to be connected to the group that had ambushed Kowalski's convoy. We planned a major operation to capture him, but before our team could move